we don't want to create Ferraris. We don't want to create athletes that they're so fast and so powerful and strong that they get injured every time they try to use that speed.
That could also happen too, right?
Exactly. We want to create like diesel trucks, right? Where
That's
they
a
can
good
perform,
analogy, yeah.
but you can also, ride them down for 25 years
And be fine.
and they're still kicking.
Yeah.
That is the Lane United legend, Armando Field.
Don't stop. Welcome to FC Game Changer. We got game. The football club that will change your game.
Welcome back, everyone, to the FC Game Changer show. And today, Tyler Tanaka is here with us. He's a doctor of physical therapy and a strength and conditioning coach who specializes in chronic pain, system dysfunction, and high performance training. Tyler is also the creator and founder of Convergence Physical Therapy and Performance, located here in Eugene, Oregon. Tyler, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited.
Yeah, now this is, we looked you up on social media, and then we see what, the things that you're doing. We're like, that's going to be a great fit for the show. And I really hope that we can, with the message, with the content, we can help a lot of athletes, not just in Eugene, Oregon, but in the entire world as well.
Definitely.
Yep. So Tyler, the first question that we have for you to link the physical therapy and the strength and conditioning side of things, what are the things that you most enjoy about the job?
So I would say that helping athletes become the person they could be and not who I ended up being is probably my favorite part. A big reason why I became a physical therapist in the first place was because my entire athletic career was plagued by injuries, and I found that the more I got injured, the worse I felt, but the more I was also dismissed by athletic training staff, whoever I was working with. Eventually when people can't figure out what's going on with you, they kind of say, oh, that person's just whatever. Insert the word here, right? So I think my favorite part of being a physical therapist is helping athletes avoid that and really reach their potential. Because there are some athletes who have all the motivation and drive in the world, they just don't have the person helping them get there who can help them with something like chronic injuries. That plus when somebody realizes they can do something that they couldn't before is one of my favorite things too.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because one of the things that I always say to the people that follow us is what we're giving you are things that we wish we had when we were at your age. Exactly. And you pretty much said the same thing. You said you've been through many injuries, I've been through many injuries, so now I think the goal is to pass that on to the youth, especially the athletes, so they don't have to go through that same, struggle, because things could have, been a lot different if we didn't get the injuries that we did.
For sure.
Back then. In terms of the clinic, do you see, what's the percentage? Do you see mainly athletes? You see the average people as well? How is that?
I would say that we see mostly athletes. The average people who we do see are just looking for something different. They either tell us, hey, I am out of shape and I really want to get in shape, but I keep getting hurt when I try to. Or they say, hey, I've been to several people before you and I just want someone who offers something new or something different. And when I hear that, it's kind of like music to my ears, because it's a chance to show, hey, we do something so different here and your results will be so different. For example, I had a woman come in, she is active and she just has this like really chronic left arm and hand numbness thing that's been going on for several years. She's gotten a surgery for it. Nothing has been able to really help her.
And she's been seeing many physical therapists.
Yeah, she's currently seeing one somewhere else, and her husband was seeing me, and she came in and we did a couple of exercises and got a pretty drastic reduction in pain or in symptoms right away. And instead of saying like, hey, 4 to 6 weeks out, you'll start seeing some differences here. I tell people, no, we should see a fairly big difference immediately, or else we know we might not be doing the right thing.
Interesting. So now she's committed. She.
Yeah, I mean, for people like that, they say, hey, I've tried this other place or other physical therapy, and that approach was okay. You know, I felt a little better after a few weeks, but I just got a huge change in one session. I'm going to commit to this, yeah, for sure.
Mindset-wise, how is that working with, let's say, you're seeing an average person right now, but then right after that appointment, now you're seeing this big-time athlete.
Yeah.
In terms of the mindset of both, what's most different between both of them?
I don't think the mindset changes, really. I think what changes is you just relate things back to their goals. Right? So if my goal is to just live my life without feeling some knee pain when I go upstairs, then that's going to be drastically different than if my goal is to return to an NFL field. Right? So the mindset is exactly the same. It's how do we get you to your goal as quickly as possible, but the goal changes.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And we saw as well when we're looking, doing the research on you, we saw that you're one of the 215 clinicians with the Postural Restoration Institute certification. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Definitely. I think when I wrote that, it was 215 at the time. There's probably around like 235 at this point.
I see, yeah.
But they have credentialing every year. But basically what the Postural Restoration Institute is, it's this, I guess, approach to physical therapy is how I would describe it. But really what it is, it's like this mindset that you have when you treat someone. So what the Institute does is it takes all the systems of the body, whether it's the neurological system, vestibular system, orthopedic system, obviously with bones and joints and muscles, and the respiratory system. And we ask ourselves, how do these systems work together? And then on top of that, we say, we already know that all humans are asymmetric. And all humans are asymmetric in the same way. So when people say they have imbalances, it's kind of not unique to them. Because we all do, right? For example, most of us are right-handed, right? And people who are left-handed still have right-handed tendencies. Interesting. Right? If you ask a lefty, hey, do you do everything with your left hand? Some of them say yes, but most of them will say, oh, well, actually, I'm right-footed. Or I eat with my left hand and write with my left hand, but I feel stronger, I do more things with my right hand, or whatever it is, And it's all neurology.
That's so, because now you might be able to tell me then, because I'm that way. When I'm playing soccer, I can only do things, I can use my right leg, but mainly with my left.
Yeah.
When I'm riding with my right hand. When I'm tossing, throwing something, I go towards my left. Why is that? Is it I grew up like that? I was born that way, or?
So the things I've heard, the things I've learned, I don't know how true they are, but there's two different things we have to look at. One of them is how well does your brain connect to each side? So in the center of our brain, it connects each half of the brain. They're called hemispheres, right? So this area of our brain basically connects the left brain to our right side of our body and vice versa. That's one thing. You might have a stronger connection between each half than the average person. The other thing that's really interesting is if we look at where the language center of your brain is, that side will affect your handedness. However, when I said we're all asymmetric in the same way, we're all left brain dominant still, right? So if your connection's better, you might have some left-handed or left-footed tendencies, but since we're all left brain dominant affecting the right side of our body, we're always pulled to our right side. So that's what I mean by we're all asymmetric in the same way. We just kind of deal with it differently. And that's what the basis of PRI is that asymmetry.
Asymmetry. And do you get to use, that knowledge in a lot of the patients that come in on a daily basis? Yeah,
so in the beginning of my career, I had taken a course as a student, and I went into PT being like, okay, I have this toolbox with all these tools in it. And then it's like I kept reaching for the same one, right? And eventually I was like, wait a second, even if I don't see these really big asymmetries, like how PRI taught us we would see in the basic courses. I know that this underlying asymmetry exists, so why would I not address that first? And then when I started doing that, my results got way better.
Yeah. So it's the place that we're in right now, your clinic, Convergence Physical Therapy and Performance. As soon as we walked in here, it's not your typical physical therapy clinic. Why did you decide to go through, you're pretty much changing the way physical therapy is. Now, if you look in the background here, we have rack, squat, and deadlifts, a lot of weights. We have turf here for, athletes as lads. And why is that?
Because we had that discussion earlier, right, of you go into a PT clinic, you see the arm bike, you see somebody on the pulleys doing this, and then you see the trampoline that you're like throwing the ball against for the athlete's return to sports stuff. Yeah. And that's kind of like the generic, we get people out of pain clinic, right? Like we return people to baseline kind of place. What we are really is we're kind of like a lifestyle transformation facility for people where if they didn't work out before, well, we're gonna teach you how to squat and press. And we're gonna highly encourage you to continue doing that, whether it's with us, whether it's on your own, whether it's with someone else, it doesn't matter.
That's amazing.
And that's really how we make long-term changes.
Yeah.
Right? Because we can't just, I call it like the dog scratching at the door. We can't just scratch at the door and hope that a human comes and opens it.
Yeah.
Right? Like we have to understand how a lock works. And that when we turn the door and open it, that's what's open, that is what opens the door, not us scratching at it, hoping that somebody comes along.
Yeah, and now that you're saying that, I feel like even the average person hearing the location that we're in, people are active. Yeah. People are hiking on a daily basis, and they're not just hiking like little mountains. People are doing, high performance stuff, even though they're considered, the average person. So I think it's needed, and what you're teaching here too is, what we do on a daily basis, right? We sit, we stand up, and we carry stuff. So I don't think the typical, PT exercises can help someone as much as, if they're doing the things that you're teaching here. Definitely. So that was an eye-opening as soon as we stepped in here. Going back, so you mentioned you used to be an athlete. Do you still play volleyball?
Sometimes. I kind of got burnt out from it, I grew up playing it.
Is there a reason?
Yeah, I just grew up playing it basically my whole life, and there was so much pressure to succeed and, get this award or win this or whatever. And I had a lot of success as a volleyball athlete, and now I just like doing different things.
How has your athletic background influenced your patient approach nowadays?
I think it's that I understand what it takes to be a high-level athlete, and I understand going through the process of, the grind every day to get a little bit better. Mm-hmm. I would say that it's probably influenced the way I approach things subconsciously on a day-to-day basis that I don't even know about. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think of a good way to articulate how it's changed, because I really can't tell you exactly how. I saw this question and I said, I don't even know, honestly. I think it just made me more empathetic towards athletes, especially when they're going through things that aren't related to the result of it. Mm-hmm. I think the process-oriented mindset of an athlete is very unique to athletics in today's age, where there's very little things that you have to just practice over and over and over again to just be a little bit better than the person next to you. Yeah,
I feel like that's easier for you to relate to the athletes as well that you see.
Definitely.
Yeah, but then it's like, okay, that's my athletic background. How can I translate that message to the average person as well? Because those people, they don't think the same way that you did or you still do.
Definitely.
So it's like a balancing act as well. Since we're speaking about that, what would be an advice that you'd give your younger self with the current knowledge that you have now?
So with the current knowledge I have now related to PT and performance, I would say that sleep and proper nutrition and hydration are probably the biggest bang for your buck. You know, for me growing up, I would stay up late. I don't even know what I did in high school, like MySpace or something. You know, I'd stay up late doing that or whatever it was. And the next day I'd wake up and, you know, go to school and be tired throughout my school day. But then it came time, you know, we would play at 7 at night and I'd just be like, whoa, I feel so out of it. And I don't know why. But if someone just went back and said, hey, you need more sleep for performance, then I would have been like, yeah, absolutely, I'm going to be the best sleeper you can be. Yeah. But no one, I mean, as obvious as it is now, no one told me that back then.
So you think that is caused by the lack of information that the young athletes, they don't have access to?
I don't think it's a lack of access to information. I think it's a lack of somebody sitting them down and saying, this will be the biggest bang for your buck. Like, don't do anything else, just get a little bit more sleep every night. Or don't do anything else, just have 25 grams of protein with breakfast.
I know.
Things like that, because as a young athlete, you hear all these things, you're being pulled in all these different directions, and a lot of it's by your parents who, they don't know anything, you know, to you. There's no outside people that athletes trust who are saying, hey, just do this one thing. Because that's how you create behavior change, right? It's just one change at a time. It's not, here's a list of 18 things that you can do to help. Yep. And then the athlete has to go in, look at this list and say, this seems like a good thing for me to do. I'm going to try it. Like, teenage athletes especially don't have that kind of drive to make themselves better.
Yeah.
But if you tell them, do this one thing that they can do tomorrow, and then you do that over and over and over, then by the time they get to college, it's like, oh yeah, I do understand how to sleep. I do understand how to eat. I do understand how to do these things to set myself up to perform. Yeah. You know, because when I was a college athlete, it's like you're eating fast food and drinking booze, and it's like not the best thing for athletic performance. Yeah. But no one told me you are directly putting yourself back as for the potential of an athlete that you can be.
Yeah, you see, like things like that I want, you know, the young athletes to watch and listen and be like, wait a minute, now I do have someone telling me little things that I could be doing that's going to improve my performance way faster, and injury prevention as well. Because, you know, they do, nowadays it's way different from when you and I were younger. Nowadays they have, you know, on their phones, they have all the access that they need.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So then my fear is also what source is reliable.
Definitely.
Right, because you go in, certain pages you go in, you're like, why are you putting this out there? Yeah. And then you have the good people too, but then for a kid to say, I think this is the best option, what I should follow, it's kind of, you know, it's tough for them because it's too many options nowadays.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you see a lot of soccer players here or not so much?
Not a ton here. I used to in Boston just because I saw so many people, but I would say that soccer isn't one of the main populations that we see here, yeah.
And how would you approach injury prevention for soccer players?
Injury prevention for any field change of direction athlete is going to come down to, you know, do you move well? Like, how does it look when you squat and lunge and deadlift? How does it look when you sprint and change direction? How good are you at it? Because the fastest people tend to be the most technically sound as well. There are very few athletes out there who have wonky running form and can run faster than everyone else.
True.
So for me, you know, I always tell people you can't do rehab without improving your performance. Or else you're just, you know, it's that get out of pain rehab. It's not the how do we prevent this from coming back.
Coming back, yeah.
So in order to, and there's no such thing as true injury prevention, right? Like there are all sorts of events that can happen that you can't do anything about.
Yeah, you can't control.
Yeah, even let's say if we studied every ACL injury for high school athletes in the past 10 years, how many of them are poor movers versus how many of them just had a really poorly set up day that day, right? Where they didn't get good sleep the night before, they didn't have the nutrition and hydration, and their body's just worn down. If you look at like their physiologic metrics, how's their heart rate variability that day, what's their respiratory rate and resting heart rate like, all these things can tell you, are you ready to perform or not ready to perform, right? So, there are wearables that can do that for you. And then you combine that with okay, how do we get this person to move better? How can we get them stronger? Can we get them more stable? There's no magic formula, but we can try our best to prevent injuries as much as possible.
I see. So, yeah, because certain things, you cannot control, huh?
Yeah.
It's injury reduction, not prevention. Because you can't prevent 100%.
Absolutely not. Yeah,
Right.
and it's more so like system resiliency, right? Like how good are you at dealing with getting poor sleep the night before? If your default mode of operation is I run on fumes every day, and then you have bad sleep that night, what are you like the next morning? Right. Whereas if you're able to rest, like your brain is able to kind of down-regulate itself, okay, I get a bad night of sleep, but the next morning I'm okay, right? So we don't want to create Ferraris. We don't want to create athletes that they're so fast and so powerful and strong that they get injured every time they try to use that speed.
That could also happen too, right?
Exactly. We want to create like diesel trucks, right? Where
That's
they
a
can
good
perform,
analogy, yeah.
But you can also, ride them down for 25 years
And be fine.
and they're still kicking.
Yeah.
Right? So the person I think of the most is John Ross. He's an NFL receiver. He played for the Bengals, and he broke the NFL combine record for the fastest 40. Strained his hamstring on that rep. And he's been in and out of injury ever since. He was a pretty high draft pick as well. So this organization said, even though we see this red flag of him getting hurt, we want to take that chance. But he ran so fast on that rep that he had a soft tissue injury, and I don't think he played more than like 2 or 3 weeks at a time without getting hurt again.
Oh, wow. You're talking about in terms of like movement, right? Like you have poor mechanics, but then there's also the strength side of things for, let's say, soccer players.
Yeah.
What do you change first, or is it at the same time? Do you train mechanics in terms of quality of the movement, or do you train strength so they gain capacity to be able to move better? What's your approach?
I think it's whatever we see, I think for an athlete, let's say it's a middle school soccer player who isn't a good mover, that basic strength and conditioning, 3x10 squats kind of thing will help that athlete. When they get to a certain training age, maybe they've been lifting for a couple of years, maybe they can squat, 1.5 times their body weight. Then you say, okay, where is this movement quality breaking down? But you can work on all these things at the same time.
At the same time, mm-hmm.
But what it comes down to is you have to be strong enough to move well too.
Yeah.
There has to be that prerequisite of strength before we worry about, does this person's squat look perfect?
I see. And do you have a certain age that you're like, this person is not quite ready for strength training? Or as long as if you're being watched and you know what you're doing, you have trainers with you, you're totally fine?
That's a great question. I think the sooner you can, I think like an elementary school age kid just needs to play, and they don't need to play sports. Like I think organized sports is a terrible idea for, up until you're 10, 11 years old.
You're talking about play, like going outside,
like
bikes.
unstructured play.
I see.
I love Ninja Warrior for that reason. It's like, hey, here's this obstacle, just get around it.
Yeah.
And this kid has to think, okay, how am I gonna do this? And they try and fail, and then they're successful. Their brain learns so much better than learning like this new strategy for how do we like attack in this situation of a game,
like
whatever it is. Like, we're gonna teach our fourth graders, how to run like a 4-4-2 or whatever, and it's like maybe just have them play like tag or something. Because they're learning change of direction, but they're more importantly they're learning problem solving. So that's my long-winded way of saying there is an age, and I don't know what that age is, but the rule of thumb is like if the kid's still in elementary school and they're in organized sports, they need disorganized sports as well.
Yeah. Let them go free.
Exactly.
Figure it out.
Yeah, and expose them to as many sensory experiences as possible. You know, think about like a field player versus a keeper, right? As a keeper, you're going to be on the ground. You're going to be diving left and right. You're going to be really good at dropping on the ground and getting up again. A player who plays field is very rarely on the ground, right? So they're just not as good as a keeper at getting up from the ground quickly and just being exposed to these different sensory situations. So as a kid, having play will expose them to that at a very early age. And then you don't get, 72-year-olds who fall and break their hip in their garage.
Yeah, and then that's it, right? At that age, with you breaking a bone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So an
that's
example
a
of it
great
is,
point.
for myself, I played keeper in high school, and I played volleyball, so I was always on the ground, right? Like volleyball, I came home with like bruises on my hips for like 3 weeks straight until my, bones got stronger to be able to take the impact. But I was actually at the Postural Restoration Institute in Nebraska, and I have a coffee in my hand, I'm walking through the parking lot, and I don't see a patch of ice, and I fall on it, like cartoon, my feet go out from under me, and I fall face first, and I spilled my coffee, but that's the only thing I did. And my brain I didn't think like I need to react in this way.
I just
knew how to fall.
Yeah.
So I fell straight down, and somebody else could have like broken a wrist or something. But all I had was like a scrape, a bruised ego, and a spilled coffee. But I attribute it just to constantly being on the floor. Yeah. Like I don't think I'll be an adult who falls and can't get up after a fall. Just because I've done it so many times.
And the cool thing too, though, with you, I asked you off camera if you still strength train, and you say, yeah, that's what I do nowadays. Yeah. And I think it's having that athletic mindset as well helps as we grow older, because it's the same thing. Myself, my wife, we're consistently strength training, just thinking about the future as well, and how can we play, with the kids, with the grandkids. Yeah. And we don't get to 70, 80, 90 not being able to do much.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think that relationship with exercise comes from that unstructured play. Mm-hmm. If you have a coach who's yelling at your face at 7 years old, then all of a sudden physical activity becomes traumatic. It doesn't become fun.
That's a great point, yeah.
Right? So you have fun playing your whole life up until you hit 12, 13, coach starts barking at you, you're not going to go home and be like, I'm never exercising again. But if you don't have that good relationship with physical activity from that young age, like if it's not fun for you, you're not going to do it. And I think that's why I stopped playing volleyball, because, I had a coach who was known for like getting in players' faces and yelling. And I was probably like 11 when I started playing for him. And it just created this really poor, kind of fragile mindset around failure. I wasn't allowed to fail, right? Like it wasn't okay. And I think looking back on things, that's why I kind of wasn't able to make that leap to the next level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a lot of coaches with that same kind of way of coaching. And I think, they don't change, because some of them, they do have a little success with it and they stick on being that way. But I don't think they recognize that they destroy like characters and, young kids much more than they're being successful. And they're just looking at their success and not the kids' success as they grow. Yeah. It's a weird thing. Going back to young athletes, for the ones that they're coming here, or even for the ones listening and watching, what are ways that you enhance performance and conditioning for soccer players? And what are things that you could be telling them to do on their own as well?
Definitely. I think one of the biggest bangs for our buck in here is just teaching acceleration and top speed mechanics, as well as change of direction mechanics to an extent.
Is there a reason for that?
just because there's how many injuries are there from like a sprint rep, you know? Like let's say you're chasing a ball down and you're neck and neck with someone, and then it's like, oh, that's when the hamstring goes, right? It's a lot of it. I mean, the higher velocity you go, the more force is going through soft tissue, the higher likelihood of injury. So if you have an athlete, especially in soccer, because in soccer what you have to do is worry about a ball at your feet, right? So you watch one of the fastest players in the world, Kylian Mbappe, right? And he sprints in a very unique way because he can dribble as he's sprinting. So when we teach sprinting to a track athlete, we teach a really high foot turnover where we have like this circular motion of the foot, but you can't do that when there's a ball in front of your feet. So what really elite level soccer players do is they keep their feet low, but their hip drives them, right? And those aren't the guys walking around with this huge like belly forward position, and those are the guys who are always like straining things, you know, quad, hamstring, groin.
Yeah.
They have all these soft tissue injuries because their muscles aren't in a good position to work. But if we can teach an athlete, here are good mechanics, here's how to drive from the hip, here's how to maintain top speed without overstriding or over pushing, then that lowers their injury risk because it becomes automatic. So that's what I mean by it's big bang for our buck, because the high velocities are when people get hurt.
People get hurt, yeah, that's true. And things that they could do on their own, is that like you have a specific set of exercises that they don't need much equipment, they can just go to the field and train?
Yeah, so what I do is I follow a track warm-up actually, and I give it to all my athletes. You know, I actually was working with a basketball player at Lane last year, and his coach called me and he was like, I told Ethan he looked like a track kid out there with his warm-ups, but he got like Defensive Player of the Year, and he got a 4-year scholarship, you know? So he got a full ride to a school in Arizona, which was like his goal. But it's because he was able to go through that season without getting hurt, whatever it was. I saw him for a couple of different things. So the things that I like to do are like an A skip, a B skip, and this drill called ankle and knee dribbles. And it teaches an athlete how to push from their hip and not use calf, quad, back, whatever it is that they currently use. And it just teaches mechanics. And there are some coaches out there who disagree that these technical drills will translate to sprinting. But these are things that can be done on a field before practice, you know. And if somebody can't skip, that's a huge red flag for me. It's like,
you shouldn't be playing.
Well, it's like, how do you run?
Right.
You know? So I think that's really big bang for our buck for, especially in soccer, you know, where, you know, you put a catapult GPS tracker on an athlete and they're running like 5 miles in a game or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So if those 5 miles are done with optimal mechanics, then it lowers that injury risk over the course of a season.
Yeah, and then you mentioned you had the goalkeeper versus the field player. Is there a difference on their strength training program for, let's say, a goalkeeper versus a midfielder?
There's a certain level at which there's a difference in their strength training program. I think that level is very high, you know, and what I mean by that is if we take a 8th grader midfielder and an 8th grader goalkeeper, their program's going to be very similar because at that age, GPP is the name of the game, right? General physical preparation. It's like we just have to get these kids stronger. And then once they have 2-3 years under their belt, then we can specialize by position a little bit. But that specialty is going to be more during practice than it is in the gym. You know, in the gym, we're just trying to improve movement patterns. We're trying to improve soft tissue quality and resiliency. We're trying to improve power output. We're not trying to do sport-specific training.
That's why you say that's going to go outside.
Exactly.
On the field.
Exactly.
And at the gym, they'll have, everyone's going to squat.
Exactly. Yep. And when we get to, let's say, the college level, then there might be a little more specialization there. But it's going to be similar for it's going to be very similar for the sport itself, not necessarily by position. And then when you get to like the pro level, maybe we can talk about how does a goalkeeper improve their goalkeeping qualities. Because for those guys, they've already done the 20% of things that makes them 80% better. Now they have to start doing the rest of the things that makes them 20% better.
Which it gets harder, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I call it the Tom Brady effect, right? Like a 7th grade quarterback isn't going to train like Tom Brady because Tom Brady's trying to get 0.5% better over the course of an off season.
Yeah.
So when we see sports training and we see it as we're going to make it look like the sport, I think that's the exact opposite of what we need to be doing, especially when kids are young. So, and we're talking athletes with the training age of like 6, 7, 8 years where they've been in the weight room, they understand all of these things, they're strong enough, then maybe we can start specializing.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic because I watched so many gym like strength program sessions with all of the professional teams, but also I see outside on the field, and that's exactly what you're saying. At the gym, they pretty much run the same set of exercises for all players, including goalkeepers.
Yeah.
When they go outside, that's when they separate, but that's professional level. That's what you're saying. They specialize on their specific training. Yeah, and another question for you related to that though, with the professional, it goes back to, okay, injury prevention or reduction. Yeah, even the professional players having the top of, medical staff, physical therapy staff top, right? They still get hurt.
Yeah.
But some of these players, they continue to get hurt with the same injury over and over and over. They have all the cameras, all the tools that they need to solve that specific issue. Why do you think that they still get hurt? They still keep going through that same, rolled ankle or, things that keep repeating?
Yeah, I think what that comes down to is that athlete has gotten by to this point with the way that they move. And to change that, you have to break them down before you build them up again. So let's say an athlete gets surgery. That's a great time to break their movement patterns down and start building them up again because you have all this time to change movement without affecting performance on the field because they're not on the field anyway.
Yeah.
But, let's say an athlete is about to go into their playoffs, right? Or they have a huge tournament coming up. You don't want to interject yourself and drastically change the way they move because that quality has to be trained over time. So if you have tools that are powerful enough to change base level motor patterns, like the ones that we use here, we are careful about when we use them. Because if an athlete's coming to us and they have a little bit of tendonitis, they're about to enter the playoffs, we're doing soft tissue work, we're doing pain control, we're doing all these things that will reduce their pain so they can get through that. When they get in the off season, then we say, okay, let's address the reasons why those were happening. But if we use too powerful of tools at the wrong time, you can set them up for catastrophic injury, where they're not coming to you for tendonitis, they're coming to you for an ACL tear.
Wow, it could affect that much.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because they're so used to their own movement patterns that now you changed.
Yep, especially at a really high level because they're so strong, so powerful, and so fast that you change what they're doing a little bit, and then all of a sudden they're getting way worse injuries. That's
so interesting. Have you had cases? People that went through that, or
not too bad. I've heard of cases happening. For myself, I've always been kind of careful about what I do with a high level athlete. So I haven't had that happen. I was lucky enough to work with a couple of really, really high level athletes through post-operative rehab. So I had 6 months to affect their movement patterns. And they came out of it. I worked with a pro hockey goalie. He came out of it at the end of this, he had hip surgery. He came out of this 8-month event having the top physical score in his entire NHL team training camp.
Wow.
So we drastically changed the way he moved, but if we did that in season, it might have been a different story, right? He could have, because we have to build on top of those movement patterns.
Yeah.
So what I tell people is hey, your ceiling is here and you've reached that ceiling without getting hurt. We're gonna do this thing that your ceiling's up here, but you're gonna start here.
Yeah.
Right? So we don't wanna do that in the middle to end of a season. We want to do that in the off season.
That's so good for people to know.
Yeah.
That's so good. Because it must be frustrating, though, for the athlete. Because I feel like some athletes, they would be like, no, change my movement pattern right now. I don't want to go through this any longer. And I think now it's like that psychology on how you talk them out of it, why we need to do the things that we're doing.
Definitely.
Yeah. Tyler, in terms of, we talked about movement pattern, we talked about strength. Where do they fall, like balance and coordination? Because you talked about the soccer players, and it's more a change of direction, a game. Where do they fall, the balance and coordination, and how do you improve that? Does it come with strength training? Does it come with, movement pattern training? Where does that fit in?
I think it fits in reps on the field more than anything else, right? I'm not going to make you stand on a Bosu ball and like toss a ball back and forth to me saying I'm improving your balance and coordination right now. I would probably say to your coach, like, hey, let's do 3 weeks of more small-sided stuff, and that's going to get these players a lot more comfortable in tight spaces versus, hey, I'm going to spend 10 minutes with you trying to do this single leg thing. Maybe we'll improve your balance a little bit, but what it comes down to is why don't we do it while they're playing their sport?
That's smart.
And you can manipulate variables on the field a lot better than you can manipulate variables in the gym. So when you say balance and coordination, to me that means comfort in situations where balance is required. Like let's say you have to go around someone, right? Or let's say it's a situation, when you watch super high level soccer, there's those situations where there's like everyone in the box and they're just like, it's like quick passes and you're anticipating, well, that really looks like a warm-up drill that a lot of teams will do.
True.
Right? Or that looks like a small-sided game. That looks like futsal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you have to expose athletes to those situations in their sport more. I think that's way more bang for the buck.
That's
and then in
so
here,
cool that you're saying that, because I feel like if I asked you, other 10 physical therapists, they would say, oh yeah, let's just stand on a Bosu ball, single leg, and toss me a heavy ball.
Yeah, so, one thing, I'll get on my soapbox for a second, one thing that really irks me is seeing ladders being used, right? Where I call it like tippy-tap training, because you're never gonna see an athlete moving their feet fast without moving their body. So change of direction and speed has to come from displacement of your body weight. How can we move you from here to here as quickly as possible? Not how fast can your feet move with your body staying still. Because there's almost no situation where you're gonna be icky shuffling in a game, right? And the best athletes are always best at ladders, but it doesn't mean that ladders make good athletes.
Correct.
So what I like to train in here is how do you shuffle and get your body further with each step and further and quicker with each step? So how do we change your shuffle mechanics? How do we change your like karaoke mechanics? How do we separate your chest from your torso from your pelvis so that you can do one of these? And then if you have to chase someone behind you, you drop step, your chest goes one way, your pelvis goes the other, and you just take off. That's what I want to train. I don't want to train how do your feet move the quickest, because I don't really care about that. So I really like defender attacker drills, right? Where there's somebody on offense, somebody on defense, and they're chasing each other in some way, whether it's side to side, whether it's circular around cones. I really like those drills because it trains those qualities that we want to see on the field without, and I don't use those a ton because I want those to get done in practice. But we can use those with these younger athletes to start training these qualities of how do you move your body, how do you manipulate your body weight to be able to go around someone, how do you avoid someone, how do you chase someone down. Those things to me are way more important than training just balance and coordination.
Correct. That's a great point. Thanks for saying that.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I've heard anyone explaining those drills the way you're explaining right now, and you're being very specific to the sport, to the change of direction sport, which is soccer.
Yeah.
And we have more, sports that do that too, but that's a great point, and I've never thought about that. When you have athletes that you're trying to get them to do the things that, will help them on the field, but you don't have control, right, because they left the clinic. How is the communication with the coach? You and the coach, do they receive that well? Or
Depends on the person. I mean, what I found is it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's a surgeon, whether it's a sport performance coach, whether it's a skills coach, the ones who communicate with other people are always the ones that I'm drawn to and I think are the best, right? Because these people understand I have deficiencies and other people are better at these things. Well, let's just give it to them. Yeah. Where, for me, I'm not gonna grab a soccer ball and practice passing with someone to improve their performance. Like maybe I'll do it to start loading a tendon again that they haven't done in a while and it's fun or whatever it is. But I'm not trying to improve that stuff in here. Like I'll let a skills coach do that. I'm trying to do all these things in the context of rehab, but I can suggest things to coaches, but I'm not going to say
you're doing it wrong.
And another interesting thing and what I've found recently is that because I understand movement, it doesn't matter what sport it is, I can not understand the sport at all, but we can work on mechanics that improve those technical skills. Right. So with Adam, our UFC fighter, he came to me and he showed me a video of this Muay Thai fighter. And he said, I want to teep like this guy. Teep is just like a front kick. He's like, I want to teep like this guy. And we literally just broke it down and we did some like hip mobility work. And I was like, all right, let's go try it on the bags. And he was like, yeah, this feels great.
That's good.
And it's just like, wow, I had no idea what a teep was before I watched that video. But we were able to train it, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And I've done that like plenty of times now. And I'm just realizing, if you understand movement and understand how to coach movement, you can coach almost anything if you have this background knowledge, like this deep working knowledge of how the body moves.
That's super cool. It looks like you see a lot of different athletes from different sports here too. You just mentioned Adam. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've mentioned UFC, him, soccer players. What else? Volleyball players?
I think at this point in my career, I've seen somebody from every single sport. Yeah, even to like the alt sports. We see a lot of ultimate frisbee players.
Yeah.
And it's just super fun to work with everyone.
Yeah. What's your opinion on kids growing up on? I'll give you an example. A country like I come from Brazil. Mm-hmm. In Brazil, it's very limited how you can access different sports. Most of us, we just grow up, we're raised and born playing soccer, right? And that's all we do. Here in this country, you have the ability to explore a bunch of different sports. What's your opinion on that? Is that, a good thing for the kids to experience many sports as they grow up, but then maybe specializing in one? Or is it better to just from the get-go just focus on one and try to master that one specific sport?
I think if you look at the data, it suggests that specializing early is a very bad idea, right? If you look at, I think there was a stat recently, I think it was the women's national team, where I think every single player in the women's national team played more than one sport in high school, right? Or you look at the Super Bowl from like 3 years ago, I think there was like 4 total players from both teams combined that didn't play more than, that played only football in high school.
4
out of like, 100 something.
Yeah, wow.
So when you look at it, specializing early is a bad idea, but I think there are those outlier kids who are like, no, I don't want to play anything else. It's not the parents that are pushing it on them. It's no one, there's no club coaches saying, if you don't come to our club practice, you're not going to play in the tournament on Saturday. Mm-hmm. So I'll give you an anecdotal story from my experience on that. Mm-hmm. There is a club team when I grew up called Outrigger, and this club team, I played for them for 1 year, and we practiced one time on Sundays, and our practice consisted of 1 hour of King of the Court, so 3-on-3, and 1 hour of 6-on-6, once a week. I played for another club. We practiced 3 days a week, drills, conditioning, like all these things. Outrigger had every player but me and one other person go Division I. And I think there was like 4 guys that are current pro players on that team out of 7 starters, and 2 Olympians. So we have to look back on it and say, all these guys were playing basketball and that's why they couldn't make the weekly practice. All these guys were playing other stuff. You know, Micah Christensen, he's the Olympic team setter. He was the state player of the year in basketball 2 years in a row.
Wow.
And he was just a freak athlete, but he didn't just play volleyball.
Yeah.
You know, so we have to look at these athletes who are super successful and say, okay, what are they doing, right? Because I think the game in Brazil is a lot different than the American game.
Very different.
Right? And if we took the top 20 athletes in the U.S., overall athletes, I'm talking LeBron James level of athletes, and we put them on a soccer field and had them play soccer from a young age, what would the U.S. national team look like?
I always think about that.
Yeah.
Imagine if we took you take like the best football players plus basketball players and translate that into having the U.S. men's national team. Because that's another thing too, though, because you mentioned the women's team. They are the top team in the world.
Yeah.
Right? It's not that way with the men's team.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there's a reason for that? Do you think they're drawn more towards the baseball, basketball, football, and then you think so?
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you know, think of like the All-American, like old-timey sports movie where, you know, the football players are in the Letterman jackets and they have a parade for them.
Yeah.
You know, they're not doing that for the soccer team, right? So, but then
it's a culture thing too, right?
Absolutely. You know, soccer is it's the kids who were good at soccer at a young age and they weren't good at the other stuff.
Yeah.
You know, there's a.
Do you think it's going to change at all?
I don't know. I don't think so, right? Because until an American, I mean, like you have like Pulisic playing overseas, right? Mm-hmm. But until they get like a massive contract, where on Instagram it's like, you know, like the Ronaldo contract, then you're not going to have that. You know, kids don't like. If you're at a high enough level at a young age, you're like, I want to make it to the NFL. You look at those contracts.
It's completely different.
It's completely different. Yeah. But I think culturally, I don't think we'll ever get there. I mean, honestly.
Yeah.
Right?
No.
It's
yeah. I think what's going to help will be the World Cup being 2026, and it's going to be here.
Yeah.
I mean, not just here. It's going to be here, Mexico and Canada, but the main stage will be here in the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
That might help a little bit.
A little bit.
But again, it's just the culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, in the U.S., you have really good athletes going to the Olympics and, you know, getting gold and whatever. But then you also have this huge like mental health crisis around athletes. So it's, you know, what do you want to choose there?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's a tough one.
I laugh, but it's really, you hear of the worst things happening to athletes who have a lot of pressure put on them, right? And I think that comes with needing to succeed.
Yeah. A lot of pressure. A lot of pressure. Going back to soccer and physical therapy, what are the most common injuries that you see?
A lot of soft tissue injuries, right? Like a lot of chronic groin strains, chronic hamstring, a lot of like tendonitis stuff. With soccer players, a lot of hip flexor stuff as well, you know? Hip flexor strains, things like that. And then obviously you have ACLs, you have Achilles, you have these like really catastrophic injuries that can happen.
Do you see a difference between male and female in different injuries? Or is it pretty similar?
Not that I honestly don't notice those things too much. I mean, with female athletes, you get a lot of like knee stuff where it's like chronically unstable knees, or, you know, you tend to get more hypermobile based injuries, but I wouldn't say that there's a huge difference that I see personally.
Mm-hmm. We mentioned about, you said sleep is a big thing that you would tell yourself, your younger self, nutrition. What are, you know, for very young athletes, soccer players watching and listening, telling a young kid to go to bed early, it's pretty hard.
Yeah.
But what should be the approach for them to actually grasp the information and be like, you know what, I actually really need to do this in order to perform better and avoid injuries. Even though I'm young, I need to have, because they need to have their lives too. What is the balance, on eating extremely well, sleeping early, getting the right amount of sleep, recovering, training, having their lives, going to the movies with friends and things like that?
I think a lot of the reason why teenage athletes will not get enough sleep is the mind-wasting things, right? Like social media and playing Fortnite and these things that are fun, but you don't need to do them till 2 a.m. on a Tuesday night. So I think an athlete asking themselves, do I want to perform badly enough to not do those things? I think is really important, because I don't care about, like, if as an athlete, if you told me you need to sleep more, like, I don't care about that. Like, I wouldn't know how to do that. But if you said, hey, just don't play Fortnite past 10 p.m., then it's like, what else am I supposed to do? I guess I'll just go to sleep. Yeah. Or like I'll read for a bit. It's like so boring, and you're just gonna fall asleep anyway. Yep. But when we look at the reasons why they're staying up, they're not staying up till 1 a.m. on a weeknight because they're hanging out with their friends and getting social interaction, right? They're on YouTube, or they're on TikTok, or they're playing video games. They're doing things that don't push the needle forward in any aspect of their life. They're doing things that are quick hits of dopamine, and I'm not saying that I don't do it, right? But I also don't have to play in soccer games.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, priorities. Yep. No, that's a good point, because I find it hard, for you to tell like a young kid to be like, hey, you should. Some of them might know that they need to be getting more sleep, but they just don't think it's the most important thing. Oh, I can sleep at 2 a.m. and be fine, which they could, but then later in life it's going to catch up to them.
Yeah, or it's affecting them, they don't even know it.
They think that's their norm.
Yeah, they go to the gym, they're like, I just grinded through this workout. It's like, well, you didn't have to if you just went to bed earlier last night.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't feel like you're grinding through the workout. You'd feel fine,
Yep.
So I really like actionable things, right? Like, okay, I'm not gonna do this after this time. Or, hey, Mom, can you buy me this thing of protein? I'm gonna make a shake every morning, no matter what. Even if I have breakfast, if I don't, I'm gonna have this protein shake. And it's like that 25 grams of protein in the morning, and that's good enough. Yeah. It's better than not having anything.
Yep.
And it's better than having a bowl of cereal, because like cereal is just dessert, right? Yeah. So I like things like that. You tell a kid, hey, have that protein shake every morning, and I don't care what else you do. I'd be like, okay, that's easy.
Yeah.
Right? And it tastes good
too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think with youth athletes we have to be perfect. I think we just have to add these little things here and there to make a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool that you said that. And I hope they're listening and watching too, and be like, oh, you know what? Tomorrow I'm gonna get my protein. Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna start taking every morning.
Yeah. But it's easy. You don't have to like cook eggs and bacon in the morning. You just put some powder in, shake it up, and have it on the way to school. Yeah, exactly. Nobody can't do that. Yeah. Right? It's super, and it's really big. It's a really big bang for your buck. Like, having protein in the morning is huge.
Yeah, and that age as well, that's when they're, at their peak. Yeah. Hormones are high, everything is optimal, and things that I wish I knew when I was, young. Definitely. That I could have done way differently.
Definitely.
Yeah. Tyler, it's getting to an end, and we ask this question to every guest. And this is a tough one, because some people, they don't know what to say because it's a broad question. Yeah. Tell us a game changer moment in your life and the reason why.
So I have two. Okay, I'll do an athletic one, and I'll do like a personal one. Okay. So the personal one was before I moved to Oregon. 3 days before I moved, I got a call from the guy I was supposed to work for, and he said, hey, we can't have you work for us anymore. Turns out that PT practice had sold. Here in Oregon. I was like, okay.
Great.
I didn't react like that. I was so stressed. We were about to drive from the East Coast to here. Right? It was like a 10-day road trip.
Where were you, Boston?
At the time, I was living with my in-laws in Maine for like 3 weeks. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm betting on myself, right?
So you still did it?
I came here, I made the business plan for the business and just said, I'm never gonna rely on anyone else for my livelihood ever again.
Wow.
That was a huge game changer for me.
For real,
because it was like burning the ships, right? And that guy who that happened with, he apologized to me. He was kind enough to offer me a part-time job while I got this business off the ground. But I was just like, I can't rely on anyone else anymore. Like there's too much uncertainty, right? And then if I am not successful, then it's just on me, right? I can't say, oh, this guy just screwed me over.
It's 100% on you.
So that was a big game changer in my life.
If he didn't call you, you probably wouldn't have opened the clinic.
Exactly. We wouldn't be here sitting here.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. And then the game changer moment in my athletic career was my college volleyball coach pulled me to the side because I was super frustrated at a practice, and I was like visibly frustrated. He said, you think Kobe Bryant ever got frustrated like this at himself, openly? I was like, probably not. He's like, then why are you doing it? I was like, shit. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to swear.
It's okay.
But I was like, oh my goodness, I was like, wait, you mean I don't? Because growing up, there was always the pressure of, and one thing that always said to me was, you don't look like you care enough. And to me, looking like you cared meant you got mad when you made mistakes. But then that outward expression of frustration it just affected me so much. Like, I was so afraid of making mistakes. And when I did, I had to react, or else people would say, you don't look like you care enough.
Yeah.
But when he said that, I just thought to myself, like, man, all these high performers, they don't, like, if they make a mistake, they're going even harder the next rep.
Yeah.
Right? I actually played with a guy who, whenever he got blocked, we knew, like, just set Taylor and he's going to put it down again. He's an Olympian. And it's just like, that's the mindset you have to have. You have to inwardly tell yourself, I'm the best person out here, even if you're not, right? Because if you believe that, you'll start playing to that level.
Exactly.
Right? And you're not going to go around saying, like, I'm better than everyone else. But
you just
as
internally,
an athlete, as a competitor, you need to have that mindset, or else you'll just be average.
Yeah.
Right? And it's a healthy mindset. You're telling yourself, I am the best player on this field. I am the best player in this state. You're not going around telling your friends that.
Correct, yeah.
But you're convincing yourself that you're the person who you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can do it.
That's so cool. I think these two game changer moments, I think so far, they were like the most game changer. Like the personal one that you talked about, the clinic, that's just amazing, because who knows if he didn't call you and say, if he called you and said, hey, everything's ready for you, come work with us.
Yeah, I'd be like, great. You know, I'd collect my paycheck, but I would never get the chance to, like, build something from literally the ground up. I knew 0 people in the entire city of Eugene when I moved here, and just hustled and had that mindset of, like, I'm gonna do this.
And here we are.
And here we are.
That's so cool. So where can people find you and find Convergence Physical Therapy and Performance?
Yeah, so we're on Instagram at Convergence PT is a good place. We like to put out some content, and we're getting a lot better at it. And then, or you can just come and say hi.
Sweet. No, we're gonna put the handles down below. And Tyler, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
I really appreciate you.
Definitely.
Yep. Thank you so much for watching, and I really hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, please help us out. Subscribe down below, and also like the video as well. I hope to catch you soon. Have a good one.